right, we got two of us here. Welcome to the HVA-Chicks radio show. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing excellent. How about yourself?
Not bad. Fifth show here. We got a special guest tonight. Everybody knows and loves.
It'll
We
be
got
love to HVAC, Ty Branaman.
yeah. Hey.
There he is.
How you doing, Ty?
I'm doing fantastic, Reno. It is
Nice.
absolutely great. Everything's been going really, really good.
Perfect. We got
Good.
we got people popping in into the chat. I see Perla's here. Hi, Perla.
Perla is amazing. She's
Yeah, she
absolutely awesome. Yeah.
is.
How's everybody today? What's going on?
Well, living life and doing our thing like usual.
Oh yeah. You're always doing 1,000
Yeah,
things at once, right? 100,000
yeah.
things at once.
That's
So what we're
right.
talking about today.
Well, we're talking about this and that, and main focus is you, my friend, and all the great masterpieces that you show us on
I
your screens.
I don't do anything great. I am just a trades guy. I have struggled learning things, and I just explain things in a way that makes more sense to me, and that seems to help some other people. And
It
that's
sure does.
that's all it is. I'm no better than anybody else. Like we're all out here helping each other, ideally. And I don't. One
Yep.
thing I hate is the gatekeeping, right? So I had so many people that would just hold information, or they would try to purposely make it more complicated. Some people just aren't good at explaining, and I get that, but some people purposely explain stuff to try to make it difficult. And so I just like, man, let's just make things more interesting, because the more that I learn about HVAC, the more that I love it, the more exciting, interesting that it gets to be.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we all have been working toward to make a thing of the past. Uh, when I got into the trade, it was a lot like that. The people didn't want to teach new people coming in, and it was do or die, pretty much.
I think it's still a lot of do or die. We gotta get
Yeah,
stuff done, but no,
trial and
it's still
error.
great.
Trial and error is
Well,
definitely the best way to learn. But when you got good people that know things and willing to help, it it's a blessing.
That's
I,
right. And
I
that's what I love about the HVAC, the HVA-Chicks coalition, is because you're out helping people, and that's so awesome. I mean, it's just like I get so excited to see I don't even have to comment because so many people are jumping in, giving really good answers. I'm like, yes, yes, that is awesome.
Yep.
So it gives me so much hope seeing so many people helping other people. I absolutely love that so much.
Yeah, yeah.
well,
Jennifer has definitely built an awesome thing.
for sure. I can say that being a newer tech in this industry, August will make 4 years for me. I've benefited a ton from the coalition and a ton from you, Mr. Branaman, with your videos and even reaching out to you and messaging you one on one about silly questions when I'm ripping open a compressor or something. And, just the help that I'm able to receive from everybody. It's great. And, I try to feed those resources to all the other new people that I see come into this trade as well. If they want to learn, the materials are there and the help is there. They just got to want to do it.
No,
So
the
All you
only
gotta do
silly
is
question is
ask.
the one that's not asked.
that's right.
Yep. HVAC overtime. O'Doyle rules.
So I got a question. When did you start actually teaching,
Well,
and
I
what
was
made you decide to want to do that?
so it was actually in I was in Miami. I had gone through a horrible divorce. I had like everything planned out and invested in property and like had the business goals, the plans, and the growth, and like the whole nine yards. And then I went through a horrible divorce where I lost everything. because they didn't want to fight. So if you don't fight, you just lose everything. And so I lost everything. I was able to sell the business to a friend of mine just to keep it what I'd built, but there was no like value in it. It's still going today, which is cool. And I'm like, man, I got to start over. And I couldn't start over in my same town because, man, like, you have all these people that depend on you. And if I go to work for somebody else, and then if I keep the bit, like, it was just this whole long drawn process. So I thought, man, I'm gonna move. And so I moved to Key Largo, Florida, just south of Miami, in the middle of the housing crunch, the big recession, and I had a job the next day. And there was a person that I was a friend of mine I met down there, and she's like, man, you love HVAC, like you're obsessed with it. Like every restaurant we go to, everywhere you go, like you make everything about HVAC. Why aren't you teaching this? And I was like, well, I didn't go to school for this. I'm not smart enough to do that. She goes, no, you told me more about physics and science than anybody I've ever known. And so she convinced me to go apply at a school. And I went through the whole application process. And, I was just figuring like, well, it'll just be one of those fun things to do. And they hired me. They said, hey, can you come in after work and do some paperwork? I said, sure. So I had my service van, drove over there into Miami, and I started filling out the application. I said, well, hey, just come on, we're going to give you a tour. I said, no, I've already had a tour of the school. Let me finish this application. I said, well, just go ahead and follow us. So I followed them in through, and it showed me where a few things were. And then right in front of the store, they said, how do I pronounce your name? I said, well, it's Ty Branaman. She goes, that's too complicated. We're going to call you Mr. Ty. Okay. And so they walked in the room. I said, hello, class. This is your new instructor, Mr. Ty. And they handed me a book and said, hey, you're going to be great. And they left. All the people looking at me going, what are we going to learn about? I was like, well, what did you guys talk about yesterday? Heat pumps. All right, let's talk about heat pumps. I just threw the book down and started teaching heat pumps. And gosh, I fell in love with it. Like I fell in love with being able to explain stuff, and people were interested in learning. Like they're like, well, what about this? Or what about that? And and some of the stuff I was like, I don't know. I'm going to have to read the book tonight and give you some more answers. And then I started having to learn more because you have to know more to teach more. And then so it started a cycle of just having to learn and having to have the why. Because some of the stuff, we just, in my day, you just, hey, here's what you're supposed to do. And you don't question it. You just do it. So when I had people saying, well, why? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Let me go find out. And then that just built more curiosity. And man, next thing you know, like I fell in love with teaching, and I had students that were loving the class, and I was helping students get jobs and changing their lives. With a student that was homeless, sleeping literally everywhere he could in the parking lot. Sometimes he slept in trees so he wouldn't get mugged. And he was coming to school. We got him set up with a business, and they had a little shack in the back that they let him stay in until he could make enough money to make to get his own apartment. And they helped him get an apartment and like changed people's lives. And it was just awesome, And so then I traveled the world for a couple of years, and then got back into teaching in San Antonio, and then several schools in San Antonio. Went to Las Vegas, went to Phoenix, and now what I really enjoy is teaching instructors how to make that difference when they're teaching people. Instructors that have kind of been beaten down and lost that excitement, or instructors that just need help making it more fun, and teaching them so that they can go and reach more people. And it's that's been pretty awesome. I'm super blessed.
Nice. Yeah,
That's awesome.
the company I used to work for, I had a helper at one time, and he wanted to learn, and I was teaching him, and like never ever would I have thought that he was homeless. And like he showed up every single day and was like always there when I got to the office to pick him up. And uh, I found out like the reason that he was there every morning early is because he was sleeping behind the dumpster at the company. And he would go in to the office like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning when they'd unlock the door, and he'd go in, he'd use their shower and everything and get cleaned up, ready to go for the day. And I'd show up about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and he'd hop in the van and we'd go to work. And one day, somebody went to throw something away and into the dumpster. I mean, it was all fenced around and everything, and somebody had seen a pillow and a sleeping bag and stuff over behind the dumpster, and they were like, what the heck's going on here? And so they like walked around, and he had like a little toad out there with like bread and peanut butter and jelly in it and everything. And come to find out, he didn't he thought that like if the company knew that he was homeless, they wouldn't have hired him. And when they found out about that, they were like, we can't have you staying out there and behind our dumpster, you know. And they put him up in a hotel for a while and helped him get his own place. And he ended up leaving after a while. Like I think he stayed for like 4 months before he went somewhere else, another company or something. But he was a good learner. I definitely wouldn't have thought that he was somebody off of the street, you know. And I was very happy to have been able to teach him what I could teach him and help him in his starting career. Hopefully, I don't, like I said, I don't know where he went, but hopefully he carried on with it and has bettered his life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My favorite place abroad, it's hard to say. There's been some really awesome places. I would have to be Australia. I just love Australia. There's so many things trying to kill you all the time. It's so vast. They have a great work-life balance. And I have, I call it my adopted brother there. I have a family that let me live with them, and I love them so much. And I hate that I don't get to just go hang out with them. And they're just amazing people. I've met such close contacts in Australia. I would, gosh, I would move there if I didn't have so much going on here. Like that would be, if I had someplace to move, it would be Australia. It's just really, really amazing people.
Yeah. Actually, Jennifer and I were talking about Australia earlier. I think we were talking with you, Nick.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we were talking about weather and climates, and like you never hear about anything hitting Australia that's devastating.
No.
Yeah.
I was there during
Wars and
Cyclone
everything.
Yasi.
Uh-huh.
I was there during Cyclone Yasi. It was a Category 5 cyclone, hurricane that turned the other direction, and it was a direct hit in the Cairns, Australia. And I stayed in town during that whole entire hurricane. It was devastating, like how powerful it was. But back then they had a system that would send everybody text messages to evacuate, and they knew where everybody was way before we started doing that here. And they only had one person die out of all of that. And that is cruel because, well, it wasn't cool, it was bad, but they, before like it was too late to evacuate, they said, okay, now go to higher ground, don't evacuate, go to higher grounds. They did all these systems set up, and I had all these messages on my phone constantly updating everybody on what was happening. I thought it was amazing. The only person that died was running a generator in the bathroom, and he died from carbon dioxide poisoning, and which is still an issue all over the world, carbon dioxide. But as far as like the response of how the government handled it, I was very impressed with that. It was quite amazing.
Ask him about the time of a cyclone.
Yeah, that was the Cyclone Yasi. I actually got in trouble with the police because I was trying to go down and get pictures of the waves coming in, you know, stupid white guy stuff, right? So and the police said, hey, if we catch you down here one more time, we're taking you to jail. And I'm like, all right. So and I was actually coming back, like sneaking through like different little hidden doorways, and there was an Aboriginal that was there that was asleep in one of the little cutout pieces, and I could not get him to wake up, and I ended up having to call emergency services to come get the guy because he was close to the water side. He would have washed away. So I was able to get the police to come, and they were like, you again. I'm like, I'm going. I was on my way back. I promise. Don't arrest me. Help this guy first. Yeah, it was interesting. Like communities coming together, doing sandbags, communities helping people board up windows, people bringing strangers into their house so that they could be safe. They moved people in the supermarkets like further in the town, inland to where it's safer. It was quite impressive. I was just blown away by that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. That'd be crazy. Like I'm just trying to help, you know. Oh man. So back on the HVAC topic, we see you imploding 55-gallon drums, and it's very impressive that you can do that in such a short period of time. And like, I mean, in my experience, like back in the day, I've left vacuum pumps running on HVAC systems overnight, and like nothing like that ever happens to an HVAC system. I mean, I know it's different different scenarios, but like could anything possibly go bad from leaving an HVAC pump on for a long period of time like that? Like could something internally implode?
No. And the only problem you'd have with leaving your vacuum pump on is that you can overheat your vacuum pump, or if you get too much moisture in air, you burn out your pump. So as long as you're keeping the pump monitored and checked, your oil is not getting saturated with water, you're not going to implode the system. If we look at the square inches of a 55-gallon drum, square inches, I have to Google this because I can't remember. It's a lot of surface area. So okay, Google, what's the square inches of a 55-gallon drum? Oops, I should do this again. Okay, Google, what's the external square inches of a 55-gallon drum surface area? So it looks like, oh, it gives me all the math, how to do the math. I just want the answer. So it says it's 3,323 square inches on a 55-gallon drum. So we take 3323. So we'll do 3323 times 14.7, which is atmospheric pressure, and that gives us 48,841 pounds of psi, pounds of pressure on that drum. So how many pounds is in a ton? Do you remember? 2,000?
Yeah.
Is that right? I think so. 2,000. So that's like 24 tons. So that's just rough, quick math. You have to check it on that. But it's like 24 tons pushing on it because you have so much surface area. Now, if we think about copper, even if it's 3/8, 5/8, whatever it is, as we have the surface area with square inches, like there's not even maybe 2 square inches right here. 2
Yeah.
square inches times 14.7, that's like 30 something pounds you'd have on that one spot. And then as we add more length to this, we also add the same amount of copper, the same amount of material. So as we add more length, there's so little surface area on it. And if you figure the amount of copper per actual surface area, there's so much strength there. Now, if I make this pipe bigger, like for example, a 3/4, you have more square inches pushing on it, but also it's still like 3 psi or 3 square inches times 14.7. So it's still very low pressure. But as we get big, like a 55-gallon drum, now there's a lot of external pressure. And compared to the thickness of that metal, it's a lot of pressure pushing in. So if we took our HVAC system and got rid of all of the tubing and had the same size volume in one container, then yeah, it would implode. One of the NASA's first vacuum chambers that they built, the big ones, actually they did the math wrong and it actually imploded because it's the size. The bigger you get, the stronger and more powerful of atmospheric pressure you have pushing. But on our HVAC systems, we have such small systems, small piping, lots of metal. There's no way for that to crush because you don't have enough square inches of surface area. And as we add more copper, we add the same amount of metal, so it can't happen. So it's pretty neat.
Nice. So in theory, if like say like a suction accumulator or a um liquid receiver, if they weren't built in steel, technically those could probably implode.
Good. And that's one of the reasons that they use steel, is because you have a larger area, so you have more square inches. So if you see these, even though this is low pressure casing, they're thick steel on there. And the same thing with accumulators and liquid receivers, is they're so big, so they use that steel for one, cost, but also because they need that thickness of it to handle that extra pressure pushing on it. We can actually calculate how much square inches of surface area that we have, and we can find out how much force is actually pushing on that metal. And you'd see how the engineers actually calculate that to see how much force they're going to need in a vacuum, but also how much pressure is pushing out all the way on each side.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Huh.
It's like the U.S. Mint. Makes sense.
Yeah. Now, like, So when we thinking about the same scenarios, like your hose is a rubber. How come? I mean, I know that they must think about that, and it's something in how they construct them, I guess. But like you would think that you keep vacuuming and vacuuming, wouldn't like why wouldn't that crush?
And that's a great question. And that's also surface area, but they build these with such thick rubber to be able to handle that. So if I push all of my pressure in one point, I can make the hose kind of kink in a little bit. But if we think the surface area all the way around pushing equally, and then how thick that rubber is, and remember it's pushing, that's pressure pushing in, but inside pressure, these are made to handle 3,000 psi of burst. So the pressure pushing out on these hoses is way greater than the atmospheric pressure pushing in. So if you think about, if I was to put pressure in a 55-gallon drum, I should actually do this experiment. Like how much psi of pressure of nitrogen would I have to put in that drum before it actually exploded outward? And you'll see that that number will be a pretty small psi rating versus, you know, what you have pushing in because of the volume. And the hose, we have a small volume, and they're made to hold pressure from pushing out, which is why if you use pressure hoses for vacuum, you can actually permeate. So it'll actually push some of the air through those little holes. If you've ever seen those little weep holes in there, you can actually pull atmospheric air through your hoses and takes longer to pull vacuum, which is why we have vacuum rated hoses that are made, instead of pushing pressure out, they're made to hold atmospheric pressure from coming in. And then we now have even the 3/4 hoses. And these hoses, this one's my favorite because it's so super flexible, but it has these little ridges in there, kind of like your like the hoses we have in our radiators for the car. Those ridges in there help hold that pressure out. Now this hose is made for specifically vacuum. We can't put any pressure in because it will blow out. It'll literally blow the hose apart. But for vacuum, it works. And really, if we figure like square inches, there's probably what, 3 square inches every 1 inch. So you figure there's a lot of strength in this, the small diameter of this hose compared to the pressure that we have pushing on it. So yeah, no, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, those are nice hoses you got there. Big hoses. We need to take a quick commercial break and honor our sponsors.
.207customs.com is your hub for all your HVA-Chicks merch needs. If you guys are looking for a hat, a shirt with the HVA-Chicks logo, a tumbler, HVA-Chicks radio show, you name it, it's on 207customs.com. Use code HVAC10 at checkout. If you're looking for quality, high-performance HVAC installation and service, reach out to Abraham Heating and Air. You can go to their website at abrahamheatingandair.com and book an appointment online. They are one of the best companies out there. They fully support HVA-Chicks Coalition and the HVA-Chicks radio show, and they are truly the place where quality meets comfort.
Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thanks for
a well
having me.
done commercial. Such a well done commercial. I like that. Quick and to the point. So one of the questions we get all the time is people say, and there's actually trainers that teach this, that if you pull a vacuum too fast, you're going to create ice, which I'm sure everybody's heard that, right? And it's possible in the north in the winter, you're pulling a vacuum, you're going to, you could literally freeze. But if we think about surface area, and you've probably seen these back in the day, like as seen on TV, these defroster trays, and all it is a piece of aluminum, and you put an ice cube on here, and it melts like super fast because it's surface area. It's taking all of the heat from this whole entire area and then transferring it to that ice, making the ice change state from a solid to a liquid. And if you put an ice cube on here, regular room temperature, that ice cube melts extremely fast. So I tell people, even if you could make ice fast enough in a vacuum that you could have microscopic ice crystals in this copper. Let's think about how many feet of copper you have inside of here. If we're to take an evaporator coil and measure how far one tube of evaporator coil is and multiply that by how many tubes there are in that evaporator coil, it's like 150 feet of copper tubing in an evaporator coil, plus your line set, plus your condenser. So if we think just this room temperature thing here can melt a cube of large ice so fast, how long is, even if I made ice, how long would that ice stay in this copper line on any typical day? Like that long, right? I mean, it's not going to last. So even if we could make ice, it would melt so fast because of heat transfer. And then once it turns to liquid, low pressure, it's going to boil into vapor. We're going to get that vapor out. And even if on the winter time it was below 32 and we made ice, and now we don't have the surface temperature, the thermodynamics to melt that ice, we could still sublimate the ice. So as it's a solid, we can make it change state from a solid back into a vapor. It takes a little bit longer, but we can still make that happen. And if anybody's ever had the old-fashioned ice trays in the freezer, you leave them in there too long, what happens to them? Yes.
Yeah.
They
They
freeze.
get smaller. And they do, they
Yeah.
freeze. But it'll actually get smaller. You see that the ice will disappear. And the same thing will happen in a refrigeration system. But in the wintertime, that's why it's important for us to add heat if we're pulling a vacuum in the winter, especially with these cold climate heat pumps, is that we pull a vacuum deep. And if we have any ice, by adding heat to the system, we make that ice melt back out. So crankcase heaters, having the heater running inside, heat gun on the line sets. I even will put a tent around my condensing unit and put a little buddy heater in there so that I can add heat to those components while I'm pulling a vacuum so that we don't have ice in the wintertime. Now, in the old days, we didn't pull vacuums in the winter. Like we did that stuff in the summer. But now that we have cold climate heat pumps, yeah, we have to sometimes do that. So yeah, in the winter, you can absolutely make ice by pulling a vacuum. We add heat, right? And then we leave it long enough. We can also have sublimation. In the summertime, no, we have it so fast. We have so much heat transfer, so much surface area that we're using all the ambient air to melt that ice super quick, which is why a decay test is important.
So you're
So
saying
let
that,
me.
all right, go ahead, Nick.
I was going to ask a question. So we're talking about ice forming inside of the system. Let me ask you this. Hypothetically speaking, say if you don't pull all of that moisture out, is there a possibility for ice to form inside of the refrigerant circuit while it's running and to cause a restriction?
It is possible. Usually
Like
takes a
a
lot.
like a sporadic, not doesn't happen all the time, just every now and then you might have a restriction.
It can happen. More importantly, with POE oil, it's going to turn the oil into an acid, and then that acid is going to start eating away inside all the copper, causing leaks. Then, as it eats the copper away from the tubing, you have little copper flakes flying along inside of the refrigeration cycle. Then those copper plates end up on the inside of your compressor terminals, and then you can have arcing going on, not 2x2, but electrical arcing. The arcing goes on, and you can have terminal blowout. But then all of the copper flakes end up in all the moving parts of your compressor. And just like with an engine, you have very tight tolerances here. And if we add copper plating, these hot moving parts, the copper plates on it, it makes these parts thicker and thicker and thicker. And now as these moving parts are trying to rub, they have less where to move. It's harder to turn them because there's more metal there. There's less oil getting between it. The parts get hotter, which means more copper plating. And then eventually you end up with these parts that are so hard to turn to get it started. Like you need more torque to get it started because of a bad vacuum. And then you end up having to put a hard start on there, not because the motor gets weak over time. No, because a bad vacuum somebody did, 10 years ago, caused enough copper plating to make that motor hard to turn. Now it needs a start kit to overcome the torque to get that motor up and running. And that's where we see it most often. Yes, I have seen moisture cause ice in a TXV, but typically what's happening, copper plating on all the moving parts of the compressor, and we end up with compressor failure. That's your most common side.
What is the truth being manufacturers saying anything under 350 microns boils off oil?
No. So there was in mineral oil, when we had actual natural mineral oil, some of the different size mineral oil, it was possible to pull with the vapor pressure some of the oil out. You couldn't even measure it though. Like we've actually done tests, you can't even see the difference in it. But it was possible to some of the mineral oil, the natural mineral oil, that some of the oil would not enough to change the volume of it, but you could have some of it turn into vapor. We went to acobenzylene oil, Was it an issue? POE, PVE oil, absolutely not possible. You cannot get that vacuum down low enough to make it boil without adding heat on it as well. So really what started at more than anything was the fact of, hey, here's an excuse for us to not pull a good vacuum. So I'm going to use this excuse for me not to pull a good deep vacuum. So you'll see that some manufacturers actually call for a vacuum down to 50 microns. They actually call for that vacuum. There's all kinds of tests and stuff that's been done on that. Jim Bergman's written some articles about that. You're not going to pull the oil out of a compressor by pulling it in too deep a vacuum. It's just, I've actually done it in my vacuum chamber, pull a deep vacuum, left it, the oil level, you can't see level. Even on old-fashioned natural mineral oil, you just can't see the difference in it. So yeah.
All right, I gotta bring this up here. Oh, wrong one. Sorry about that. This year, I actually wanted to bring this up because I came across somebody not too long ago who just got their EPA, and they didn't know what a triple evac was. Well, I mean, I haven't taken the EPA course in a long time, but I'm pretty sure that when you take the EPA course, it says right in there the triple evac and teaches you about triple evac. Am I correct in saying that? Do you guys remember it being in the EPA course?
There are things in the EPA course that are outdated, and such as you pull a vacuum too fast, you're gonna have moisture freeze. There's things in the EPA course that needs to be out. You know how hard it is getting any kind of course changed? I'm gonna step on some toes. I'm gonna back off of that a little bit. Let me just put it this way. It's very difficult getting information updated on test. It's good people are behind it testing. It's just trying to get updated information is very difficult. So let's go back to where that came from. Originally, back in the day, we would actually use refrigerant, and we would purge lines through. And refrigerant, as you push refrigerant through, it would move the oil. And as you're moving the oil, you're loosening the moisture. You're helping push a lot of that stuff out of the system. So we could literally purge through. Now, even back in my day, we still had micron gauges. So micron gauges aren't new. It just was not widely available. So a lot of people didn't have it. So when you talk about pulling a deep vacuum and not everybody had access to micron gauges, we would say in science, if you have a container and you have substance A in this container, whether it's liquid or vapor, you have substance A and you want to dilute it with substance B, you would exchange it 3 times. And by doing it 3 times, your quantity of substance A would be low enough that it wouldn't be that big of an issue. So when they said triple, it used to be with actual refrigerant. So as we pushed refrigerant through that system, it removed enough air and enough moisture from the air and the oil that it was okay. And mineral oil is forgiving. Alkylbenzylene oil was forgiving. Like you could get moisture in there. It wasn't good, but it was okay. Like it would handle it. It was okay. But then came along the EPA to where, hey, we found out that this was ozone depleting. We can't vent this anymore. So we're going to have to change those practices. So what they did is said, hey, we're going to use nitrogen now instead of the refrigerant, because nitrogen you can vent into the air. So it's easier for people to transfer from this process over into using nitrogen. So the problem is, though, that process of diluting 3 times doesn't work for surface area. And now that we're not using refrigerant that's actually moving the oil, the nitrogen doesn't move the oil, it doesn't carry oil. So that oil isn't being loosened, isn't coming out. It's not giving up its moisture. It's not doing anything for the surface area. So ultimately what you're doing is wasting a lot of time in nitrogen. Now, let me clarify. I flow nitrogen every time I braze. Okay. Almost every time I braze. I'm not perfect. But I heavily believe in flowing nitrogen. I also flow nitrogen before I pull a vacuum to get the moisture latent air out of that system before I pull a vacuum. But then the goal is to get the system clean, dry, and tight. Whether we do that in one vacuum or do it in triple evacuation, once you get below 350 microns and it holds, you're dehydrated. So here's the issue with triple evac we have now. Everybody uses these tanks, right?
Yeah, and they have moisture in them.
Yes. If you take these tanks and you turn them upside down and use a moisture indicator and a paper towel, you'll see that there's a ton of moisture in here. So when you're actually trying to push that triple evacuation and you're putting moisture back in, it's literally taking longer. Now, some people in their area, they get really dry tanks and, it doesn't hurt anything. But if we end up with tanks with moisture, you're more likely to have a problem. Now, I started using these little tanks. They're disposable little Ambro tanks. Super expensive, but I can travel with these. These I've found to be super dry. I haven't had any moisture issue. So you could triple evacuate this because it's dry, but you're still not gaining anything. I mean, for the most part. It's the fact of, if you look at history where it comes from, it makes sense. And then we see that some of that text is still in the manuals, and it's hard working for a manufacturer and getting the manuals to update. Like, it's almost impossible getting them to update manuals. So they leave it in there. Hey, and their thought is, well, triple evacuation won't hurt anything. Well, if you have true dry nitrogen, it won't. So I said, but what about our wet nitrogen? What about this? And I said, well, that's the problem with the nitrogen supplier, not the problem with us. And that's why it stays in the manuals. And Jeremy Smith, he did a really great article at HVAC school talking about dry or nitrogen does not absorb moisture. So, if somebody wants to do it, fine, okay, just maybe it takes a little bit longer for them to do it. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But the fact is, nitrogen doesn't actually absorb moisture like we think. More than anything, if you had a vacuum that you're trying to pull and you had ice, and because it was winter time, right, we had the ice, our surface area is too low, and you put nitrogen in, if that nitrogen was warmer, keywords, if the nitrogen is warmer, then you could help melt some of that ice in as you did triple evacuation. If there's some ifs there, but if your nitrogen was outside too at whatever 30 degrees, you're not gaining anything. So
Yeah.
Does that help?
So when we pressure test a system with nitrogen and the temperature changes, when the temperature rises, is that the moisture inside of the nitrogen that is?
Well, you got two factors there. One, as we add nitrogen to the system, you're adding pressure, you're making water condense onto the metal. So you should really purge nitrogen through before you pressurize. Just like an air tank, right? You run an air compressor and you push all that air in the tank, and as you pressurize it, the water condenses out. The same thing happens in our lines. So by purging the nitrogen first and then pressurizing, you reduce that. But nitrogen changes its temperature, changes its pressure with temperature. So as the day heats up, your nitrogen pressure will increase. I've had people before, their pressure in the morning and the afternoon was the same. They said, man, I'm good to go. Turns out though, as the pressure changed, the temperature changed, the pressure should have gone up, and it didn't, and they had a huge leak. On the alternative, I've seen people pressure test at the end of the day, come back the next morning and their pressure's low, and they're looking for a leak everywhere and they can't find one because the temperature changed. So nitrogen does follow Boyle's law. As temperature changes, pressure changes. So
yeah, when I first started in the trade, some people I had teach me told me that nitrogen will not change with temperature and da da da. So I one time left the system overnight under a pressure test, went back, and my pressure had dropped. I'm like, God damn, I got a leak. I must have searched for 2 hours, couldn't find a leak anywhere. And like I left it alone, and toward the end of the day, my pressure was higher than where I had originally set it the day before. And I was like, okay, whoever told me that this doesn't change was definitely wrong.
And when you hear those things, like, people say wrong information. I've told people wrong information, but we learn and we grow. And there's good people that intend on teaching you what they taught. And we believe the things that we first learned it. So when somebody tells you something different, it's challenging to our ego. This isn't what I know. This is different from what I know. And then we get new information. We have to then reevaluate. Let's not just believe everything that's new. Let's research it. And I've had so many really, really good people that meant well that taught me wrong things. Like, oh, nitrogen doesn't change pressure with temperature. No, it's completely false. And I can prove that. But it took time that I had to unlearn. It's like the art of unlearning. I had to unlearn stuff. And then I had to learn to be careful when I learned new information and actually go and research it. And that's what I started doing, is researching some of these things like triple evacuation, like some of these things that were, hey, that's just the way it was. And I started learning, like, oh, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, that was definitely my first learning experience on don't listen to everything and believe what you hear.
Don't what?
Don't listen to everyone and believe everything you hear.
Don't what?
Don't listen to everything and believe everything that you hear.
Sorry, don't what?
I almost did it again.
I caught
I
on
love
to it the second time, and I wasn't gonna say anything. I was just gonna let him keep thinking.
He's so quick on it, man. That's believable.
I love when people say, well, that new vacuum thing's like, no, it's not new. And that's one of the reasons I have a library of old books, is because when people say, well, we used to, or old school, I'm like, well, let's actually go look and see if that was in the old school ways. And so I go and look the stuff up and see, oh, actually, even back then, they said the same thing we're saying now. Or here's what they said back then. Here's what we're saying now. What's different? Let's find out the why behind it. So that makes it fun going and doing that research and finding things out. If you guys know Tractor Man 44, he's awesome. He's on TikTok and YouTube, incredible man. But I got to visit him in person. Incredible trade. I love meeting the tradespeople that came before us, and he gave me a bunch of his old books, and so I shipped them home. I hadn't even opened them up yet. It was 330 pounds of books that I have that I'm adding to my library of golden information, that some of the stuff you can't get anymore. And so when people ask questions, I can go and like, hey, let's look to see where it came from. And also, as I'm looking for one piece of information, I also learn a massive amount of information. So it's fun when people ask questions and I'm like, well, here's what I think. Let me go double check. And then I learn like 10 more things in the meantime. So, it's awesome when somebody says something and then you go to then find out, source yourself. Hey, I believe it's this, but let me go double check. And then you're like, oh, wow, there's actually more to it than that.
Yeah. Research.
Always
research
be
is good
curious.
as long as it's not whales. So always be curious. I like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. We need to take another break for our sponsors.
That was fast.
Cielo Wi-Fi thermostats are the HVA-Chicks choice for all your mini split and conventional split needs. If you're not sure which Wi-Fi thermostat to choose Cielo. Want to kill 99.9% of contagions in commercial and residential spaces without creating ozone? Check out the Air Shield by Revive Air. Thank you, Revive Air, for supporting the HVA-Chicks radio show.
And we're back.
We're back.
We're back. So before I forget, let's talk about the Grit Foundation. So everybody says all the time, I hear it all the time, we need more people in the trade. We need more kids interested in the trades. But then it's like, what is anybody doing about it? And back in my day, we had ag class, shop class, we could do stuff, and they don't have that in schools anymore. And trying to get schools to change is super difficult. Trying to get schools to adapt trades is super difficult, which are schools that are doing it. Thank you for doing that. We thought, how can we reach more people? This wasn't my idea. This was Brian Orr, Leilani, and Rashir's idea. How can we get more people excited into trades? And it came with the Grit Foundation. And what they're doing is working with contractors. And contractors are hosting these grit camps. And so we actually bring kids in local to the community, not just, just local to your community, anywhere from 12 to 17. So it's an early on investment. And then we give them a set of plans. And then we have them kind of like an escape room. Hey, let's let you discover these lost skills. And they get to take plans and they get to use a tape measure. A lot of times for the first time, they're using a tape measure and they get to use fractions and how to take the outside dimensions of this and figure out what the inside dimensions are of this board. And then they take the inside dimensions, they have to add the width of the board to get how long they should cut it. And a lot of kids don't realize how wide a 2x4 is. There's adults that don't know how wide an actual 2x4 is. So they get to use discovery and the Socratic method of figuring out how to do some simple stuff like wood, stuff that we take for granted, using a tape measure. But these are skills now that we're introducing to young people, using the drills. But then we also go into plumbing, like using PVC cutters and glue. And then we actually work with brazing and fire, and they get to put connections in. We do electrical work where they're actually using a meter and seeing the bulbs, series and parallel, and checking bulbs. and they're getting to explore and, try out the trade, sometimes for the first time ever. And so because it's a local contractor and they're seeing local people do it, it gets people excited, young people excited about the trades. Maybe they're not going to do the trades, but now they have a new appreciation for it. And maybe they think, hey, I want to go to college. Maybe they can work.
Oh, I think Ty
We
just
lost
froze.
him.
Yep.
There he is.
He's back. You froze for a minute, Ty.
Sorry.
No, you're
It's
all right.
super awesome. Getting
Your-
kids excited about the trades.
Your internet can't handle your energy.
Also, the mentors, Danny, I got to hang out with Danny, which is awesome. He's so cool. But him and his family was there. He actually mentored the kids. And one of the great things about how we do it is we work with the mentors of how to teach the Socratic method, how to teach by building curiosity, how to teach by asking questions. And my David is like, do this, do that. And everybody works for us the same way. Do this. Why don't you know that? And so by teaching the Socratic method, how can we ask questions to get people curious? And so that's what we start doing, is to let them build curiosity. And so now we have other tradespeople asking questions, leading kids to discover what they do. Now they think, wow, I have these skills that I've just taken for granted. And also, ideally, as they're working with apprentices, they see how to build curiosity to keep apprentices interested in what we're doing. And it's an investment into the future for contractors, for the tradespeople, but also it's just a great way to show respect for the trades that we have, that what we do. And it's super exciting.
Yeah.
And we give them
more hands-on things for them to do, and
hands-on.
when they realize that they can build things with their hands, it really gets them interested.
Working with fire, when else they got to work with fire?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
And some of them, it's the first time they ever got to use a screwdriver, and so we get to show them like, hey, you can turn this around. This actually does more than one thing, and they get to take stuff apart. I don't know. I can go on for an hour about that, but one of the things I thought was really cool. Now I love it because we're reaching kids, right? I mean, that's number one. I love it too because we get to see tradespeople get excited about the skills they take for granted, and we get them excited about teaching and showing a new generation what they do. But the thing I wasn't expecting was, after one of the grit camps, I got to meet some of the parents, and they came and said, hey, my kids were so excited. They spent an hour telling us about this box. Now, the parents aren't excited about this box, right? But they are excited to see their kids talk to them about everything included in that box and how they did it. And 6 hours of a kid not using their phone is amazing in its own. But then they said for an hour, the kid explained to them all the stuff they did and why they did it and all these things. And they weren't distracted. They weren't on their phone. They asked them, hey, what'd you do at school? Nothing. And yet they spent an hour telling them about their box. And I thought, we figured out something that's actually working. And so that is
amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. I know my kids, the internet, like, power goes out, it's the end of the goddamn world. Yeah.
So how would you be able to expand something like that to, say, an area in Kentucky?
So go to the gritfoundation.com. There's
Mhm.
two grit foundations. One's for a firefighter, but the gritfoundation.com, that's where we are working with contractors all across the country to host these camps. So your first step is go to the grit site. And then there's two ways. You can be a mentor. We're working on a mentor course to actually get people prepared for the Socratic method, because it takes some time. And then also for the host. So if a company says, hey, I want to host one of these camps, we have a list of questions to make sure you're ready, because it's going to be an expense. Right? It's going to be a time investment. And you got to buy wood, you got to buy boards, you got to buy, a lot of stuff. There's an expense for a contractor. But once they do that the first time, we're going to help them get it set the first time. And we want them to continue to do that. So every quarter, do one of the grit camps, keep showing new kids how to do it. So if you're interested in doing it, go to the Grit Foundation, thegritfoundation.com, and go through the process. There's a little checklist. Once you get past the checklist, we can set up a meeting with Leilani. She's going to send you out the grit guide, 75-page guide, how to go through it. And then when she's like, yeah, we're ready to do all this, we'll set up a date, and then we'll get out and get started. I've been going across the country, getting grit camps set up and getting contractors hosting the grit camps, because we can't depend on the schools, right? I mean, nothing
No.
against schools, but they're not doing it. Even the trade schools, and I know some amazing instructors at some amazing schools, but a lot of the trade schools, they're not doing it. So we have to set up apprenticeship programs in-house for companies now. So we're having to think, how can we train people? I can, a lot of people can do the work, but how do you train somebody else? That's a whole nother level. So we want to eventually get to the point where we can help companies put together apprenticeship programs and help them do the training, how to grade people, how to ask questions, how to build them up, and also learn themselves. Grit, growth, and resilience in the trade. So it's not just about the kids learning, which is amazing in itself. Like, we have a huge, big vision. We want to help improve the trades and lift the trades up, lift the tradespeople up, give respect to the trades, not just HVAC, but carpentry, plumbing, electrical, floor, the concrete, like all the trades, getting people excited about working in their hands. That's what we want.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And
It's
teaching
a
them.
lot easier to find somebody who's looking to get into the trade with zero experience that wants to be trained than it is to find somebody that's already skilled in the trade. I've noticed that. And um, sometimes it's difficult because there's some companies out there that don't want to hire somebody unless they have the experience because they don't want to take the time to train you. There was a company I was working for, and they decided that they were going to start building their own army, and they started hiring people that wanted to get into the trade, and they would send them to school for a year, and that way they would be able to get licensed once they had enough hours. So I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome that, it's designed to uh designed to introduce a younger generation to start doing something like this. It kind of gives them an idea of, is this something I may want to do? It may build that curiosity, like you were saying.
Right. And Jen said lots against schools, actually. We should have a separate topic, a separate episode just about education and schools. And I
Yeah.
hear so many people saying, hey, go to trade schools. And I'm like, hey, go to the trades. Yes. When people say go to the trade schools, oh, because I've been into the depths of trade school. I've seen the good things that can happen, and I've seen
Yeah.
the horrors that's happening with our for-profit, specifically the for-profit trade schools, and how they're out there to saddle people with debt and not provide the skills they need. And I know good instructors trying to fight the good fight, but there are trade schools out there as diploma mills, and they're money-making machines, saddling people with debt, with student loan debt, without putting. Anyways, that's another topic for their day. But yeah, I think a lot of people would like to know about that.
There's no guarantee what you're gonna get with a trade school. When I went 3 nights a week, and I did the propane, natural gas, and the refrigeration course at the same time. And whatever the day classes were doing, we weren't allowed to interfere with any of that. So we didn't get really any shop training time on any HVAC equipment. Like, they brought us in, they like pointed at this and pointed at that, but like, as far as firing up a torch or hooking gauges up, they wouldn't let us do any of that when I went there. I was really disappointed. I mean, I was already in the trade for a few years and had been getting that knowledge through the company I was working for, thank God. But if it was somebody who didn't know anything about anything, they wouldn't have learned anything in the class that I took.
Right. And see, if you're going to trade school, it should be hands-on learning. Like, that's what
Yeah.
you can do the theory anytime and anywhere. I love what Jen's doing with SkillCap. They can learn the theory, when they're on the toilet or whatever time, schedule a time in, learn some theory. You can do theory remotely anywhere. When you're going to the school, that's your chance to get your hands on it, to understand, pull a vacuum through the hoses, and then pull a vacuum through the big giant hoses and see the difference. And you can actually go and do things like, oh, let's put an ice cube and a whole bunch of copper, like literally get copper and put an ice cube and see the difference in pulling a vacuum. Where you can do it, you can see it, you can touch it, you can learn it. And and there's some instructors out there that are doing that. And there's trade schools out there that are doing that. It's just fewer and fewer of them just like for-profit private equity companies are taking over a lot of our industry and they don't care about the trade, there's a lot of business people that are taking over trade schools and they do not care about the trade. We had a school that I was helping build. We were doing really great things and they brought a banker in from Chase Bank, and it was all about profits. Like everything is about profits. And then, oh man, it crushed my soul. You know, it's like, hey, charge what you want to charge. Let's teach them. Let's actually give what we're supposed to promise. Anyways, we'll save that one for another day. I'll get the actual data in fact.
I'll say this. I'm debt free with hands-on and love to HVAC YouTube certifications.
That's what it's about. It's about learning, right? I didn't go to school for this. I learned it by being curious and people asking questions. And then as you teach, you learn more stuff. And you don't have to go to school to learn this. But for me, being in a class in front of somebody, when I go to some of the conference things, helps me learn because there's somebody there I'm accountable for. So I know not to get on my phone because this person's looking at me and they know who I am. So I have to stay focused. And I do things like write notes to keep me focused. There's all these things I do that help me learn. So there's still value in in-person learning. But I think the difference is, are you paying $20,000 to $25,000 for that? Or, you know, can you get that someplace else? Like somebody was talking about Skillcat, like, well, some of those classes are kind of boring. Yeah, no, I get that, but it's $10 a month. So like, you're not out anything, you know? So it's like, that's okay. I can get that. And not just, there's lots of online courses. And you got a lot of manufacturers have some really good online courses, but also vet the information. So when a manufacturer says, you know, hey, you have to triple vac, it's going to void the warranty. You know, that's not true. And then find out, where does that really come from? Why? And can they even void the warranty? They have to prove it from the Moss Bogman or something.
I was just about to say, prove it.
Yeah. So, yeah. And a lot of the stuff happening today, there's people saying, like, we'll just touch on this. I don't know how much time we have. That we have the refrigerant shortage. 32, there's plenty of it, but we have the 454B shortage, right? Some places you cannot get it at all. Like, it's unobtainable. Yeah. Some places you can get it. Some places you have to buy another R454B piece of equipment before they let you buy a tank of refrigerant to fix the ones you've already installed. Which, is that like a Ponzi scheme or what? Like, anyways, the point is that we don't have the 450. Some places can get it and some places cannot. So you cannot get the refrigerant you need to charge a system. You cannot get it. So then it comes to, hey, you have a customer that needs air conditioning. They need cooling. Your business sold them a piece of equipment and you can't get the refrigerant for it. The business is on the hook. The contractor, the technician, everybody is on the hook. And then we have people far displaced from that saying, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that because it's not right. Well, I'll tell you what's not right. It's not right selling a piece of equipment, not having refrigerant for it. That's not right. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to let that slide. So when I tell people, it's illegal to mix your own R454B. It's not legal. You have a customer with no cooling. I'm not going to condemn anybody for doing it. I know about 14 companies that are mixing their own R454B because of desperation, not because they're like, oh yeah, I just want to do this. No, they can't get it. Pulling out 454B and putting in 410A. You shouldn't do that. But if you don't have any 454B, you don't have any, and it works, and you know, and it's like, well, it's not designed for it. I've seen carrier package units with 410A TXVs in them. I've seen coils where somebody literally pulls the 454B tag off, and guess what's behind it? 410A tag. So, and the compressor is different. You will have some capacity loss, but we're testing 454B in 410A equipment. Should you do it? No, you shouldn't do it. But people have no other options. So you have to do something. I'd rather see somebody do that than have a customer, oh, sorry, the right way is I have to use 454B. And we can't get any. So you're going to have to wait till October or January before we get you cooling. But it's okay because we're only going to do things the right way. Now, what I'm against adding 32 on top of 454B because now it changes all your numbers. You know where your saturation is. I'm against adding 410A on top of 454B because that changes all the temperatures. And I'm against putting straight 32 in because it's a different compressor, a different oil, and you will have compressor damage because R32 has a very hot discharge line temperature. So yeah, the right thing is use 454B. But where are those people when you have a customer that can't get the refrigerant they need for cooling, where are they at?
Yeah. So we know that 454, 410 will work in those units. So will 410 work in a 32 unit?
No. So
No.
R32 is way more efficient. So it takes approximately 30% less R32 than it does 454B. It's that much more efficient, which means you have to have a compressor that moves a different volume of refrigerant. So if you put 410A in an R32 system, the 410A doesn't carry enough heat, doesn't carry enough BTUs for every pound that it changes state. And that R32 system can't move enough volume of refrigerant. So you're not going to have the cooling you need. If you try to put 32 in a 410A system, the high discharge line temperature, it's going to burn up the compressor. 454B and 410A are very, very, very close together. So it will work. You shouldn't do it. It will work, right? So in desperations. But 32, we don't have a shortage of R32. Daikin went with 32. The rest of the world has been using R32 for a decade. R32 is a great refrigerant. It's the refrigerant we should have gone with. And people are like, oh, R454B has a lower global warming potential. Hey, look, I'm all about the environment too. But if we look at the facts, 454B is 31% 134YF, which breaks that into a TFA, which is a forever chemical that Europe is already working on banning.
Right.
So if we talk about the environment, 1234YF is bad, which it makes up 454B. Also, it takes 30% approximately, I have to get the data on that, more 454B per ton of cooling than it takes for R32. So if you do your global warming potential by volume, you're still pretty dang close overall.
Yeah.
454B is patented. 32 has an open patent. Anybody can use it.
And I know we're out of time here, but they claim that the shortage is due to the tanks, the containers, not the refrigerant itself. But
One factor, not the reason.
Why are they sending equipment out that's still not charged enough? Period.
Yes, sir. Exactly right. And now here's the thing. Rumor, right? So rumor is that Chemours and Honeywell made very good deals with manufacturers to use 454B. And it was good because they didn't have to make a bunch of changes to their manufacturing. Same equipment, same coils, a lot of the same stuff. And then they get a discount for using that refrigerant when they buy in bulk. So if you get a discount for putting that refrigerant in and then you make agreements, right? If you make agreements and they're like, hey, we're going to put in only for a 10-foot line set because, it's flammable. And now you have to add refrigerant. Where is that contractor going to get that refrigerant? They're going to go and buy it. And there's only 2 companies that have the patents on that. So, you see a connection here, right? So now they're forcing you to go buy it. Now they make the money on it. Now, those 2 companies could say, hey, we're going to use recovery tanks temporarily, and we're going to charge refrigerant in those recovery tanks. Or we're going to let reclaimers that already have reclaimed 32 and already have reclaimed 1234YF, we're going to let them put it together to make 454B, AHRI 700 standard certified, and let them temporarily put this out into the market so they can ease that. They're not allowing that. They're not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, I heard someplace they're able to get the 100-pound tanks. So what they're doing is they're buying those and putting it into a recovery tank and shelling it around that way.
I was promoting that 90-pound tanks. Go buy the 90-pound tanks, you can get it. But then the new problem came up. The adapters for the tank. It's a reverse thread adapter you have to have for the tank. Everybody started getting sold out of the adapters. They didn't have enough adapters ready for the tanks because nobody's expecting to move that many tanks. Like, that's a legitimate thing. Like, nobody expected they were going to buy up all these adapters all of a sudden. So all the adapters got bought up. So I stopped recommending that because people were getting the tanks and they couldn't get the adapters for it. Sold out across the country.
Yep. One thing after another.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's and then we're having these webinars. Hey, we're going to have a webinar, in like 3 weeks or 2 weeks away. We're going to talk about this from all the industry people that made this happen. I'm like, what good's a webinar going to do? We need refrigerant, right? That's what we need.
Right.
And I am thankful. I thank you, Carrier, Train, Linux, Ream, for adding extra refrigerant, or actually what I believe they should have had in the first place, but adding extra refrigerant up to 25 and 30-foot line sets. So now we don't have to add new refrigerant to those systems. Thank you for doing that. I know York is still holding out of not doing that, but that's something, right? It's better than nothing, but we
Yes.
still have a problem. Why are we being forced to use a refrigerant and we don't have refrigerant to use? Give us refrigerant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Instead of a webinar, refrigerator.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
I get it. Give us,
A
yeah.
refriginar.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like I see some of the names, and I respect the people that's on these webinars. Like I have respect for them. I have respect for their knowledge, but a lot of these people are so disconnected from us. It's in front of the customer that has to say, hey, sorry, we can't get it. Or a small company, they were putting in 454B. They took the training classes. They bought the tools. They read the installation manuals. They followed through everything they were supposed to do legally. And now you're saying, hey, if you want to buy refrigerant, you have to buy another 410A system, and you're going to pay at least $1,000 to $22,000 for a drum of this to service what you've already sold. So yeah, people can go to 32, but the whole country can't. And then even if you go to 32, you're having to buy more equipment just so you can service your existing customers. It's a huge issue, and so I want to make some videos coming about this. It's going to upset a lot of people. It's one of those what you call career killer videos, but somebody's got to start talking about this. Somebody has to talk about this.
I'm gonna be looking forward to it for sure. I love videos like that. Let the knowledge
I
out.
love the controversy.
Yep.
I don't love
Awesome.
controversy. I like everybody to be happy, go lucky, and have a good time, and everybody want to learn. Like that's what I like. I don't like controversy, but
I missaid that. It's not the controversy. It's somebody standing up to the controversy.
Yeah.
I stand up to trade schools taking advantage of people. I stand up against technicians that are doing less than positive work, and I taught a lot of people to be prepared for the A2L refrigerants, to be prepared for that. So I figure, hey, I've done videos to get people prepared for that. I also have a responsibility, and I think everybody who prepared people for A2Ls has the same responsibility to, hey, let's hold some people accountable, because this is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Not acceptable.
I agree.
Yeah. Regardless of what it is, it's honorable to stand up for truth. For
Right.
sure. All right, guys. We got to call it a night. This has been a great show. Thank you, Ty. We could do this
Thank
all
you, Ty.
night. We could do this all night.
Let's keep
I'm
going.
enjoying it. But fortunately. All right. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Nick. It's been a great
Thanks
show.
for having us.
Anytime. We'll see you again soon.
All right.